So if you're not in the trucking business, you may find this video boring, I don't know, or maybe not. But it's a bit of a comparison between the way things were when I first got into the business and the way they are today. And, you know, I started doing this in, 91, I think, 92, no, I think 91. Yeah. So it was over 30 years. That's when I legally started. I actually first time I drove a truck was in the late 80s. I didn't have a license, I was too young, but I worked for a traveling circus, and they let me drive. I drove an old 1974 International cab over, and I drove I think it was an even older model International gasoline truck. You know, it had a gasoline engine. And that's where we hauled the tent, you know, the big top around on. And the 74 International, which was a diesel pusher, we hauled equipment. Actually, we hauled camels and elephants in the front part, and in the back part we hauled some equipment. It was an old moving van, so I had side doors in the middle. Anyway, but my first legal job, hauling commercial freight, was probably 91 or 92, and I had to take a bus from Dallas. Did I pick up the bus? Yeah, I picked the bus up in Dallas, all the way to Knoxville, Tennessee. That was a long bus ride, because you know they stop in every little town. So, and I had a Freightliner cab over. I think that thing had a 350 Cummins in it, so it had no power, 10-speed transmission. I think I was lucky if that thing hit 65 mile an hour. And I mean, I did okay, I guess. I made okay money at the time, man. What was I making? I think I started out at 18 cents a mile, and man, I thought that was big money. Man, I thought I was somebody now. And that Freightliner cab over, 18 cents a mile. And my first load was a load of cigarettes I picked up in Macon, Georgia, and it was going to East St. Louis, Illinois. Now, you got to remember, we had no tracking on these trucks back then. So they basically turned you loose in a $100,000 truck. I don't know if that truck was worth that much, but you know. And it was a dry van, so say a $10,000 trailer, and a load of cigarettes. That was probably $1 million worth of cargo. And they just turned you loose until you call them every day, right? And that was about it. Now the whole Qualcomm communication thing was just starting to get started. So a lot of these big companies, they had that. But even with that, you really couldn't track the trucks, you know, like you can now. So you turn this guy loose and you hope that he did his job, and you hope that he didn't just drive off with your truck and, you know, your cargo and end up in Mexico or something. And you hoped he called you every day. And if they needed you, or if you had an emergency at home and they called the company and said, hey, I need to get a hold of, you know, of this guy because, you know, his mom died or something, they would turn your fuel card off. So when you went to get fuel, your fuel card wouldn't work, so you'd have to call in the office. And that's how they got a hold of us. You had to call every day an 800 number, and if they didn't have enough dispatchers, you would let that phone ring 50 times. And there was no cell phone. No cell phone. You had a bank of pay phones at every truck stop. You may have 10, 15, 20 of them along the wall, and that's where you made your phone calls. You also had phones in the restaurant at the tables, so you could call there if you had like a calling card or something. You could use those for long distance or calling 800 numbers or whatever like that. But that's how we did it, man. And you know what? We survived, and the brokers survived, and dispatchers survived hearing from us once a day, and they were happy with that. Of course, nowadays everybody's got a cell phone. They want to be able to get in contact with you 24/7. You've got some of these brokers that'll call you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 2 o'clock in the morning. And if you don't answer, they get butthurt. Whatever. There's some brokers, every shift change. If they do have 3 shifts a day, every shift change, somebody will call you. You know, now if they called you at 2 in the morning and you were driving, you would think they would figure out that at 2 in the afternoon you're probably sleeping. They don't care. They're going to call you. Now, we don't deal with brokers here where I work. Well, hardly ever. So I don't really worry about that too much here. But I've done it with other companies, and it's just ridiculous. But that's how we did it back then, you know. And it was scary. It was very scary when I first started. Backing up. You know, we still had 48-foot trailers, although the 53-foot trailers were just coming out. They were just coming out, and I would get into a truck stop and I'd be terrified if I couldn't pull through, if I had to back in, and I had to back in between 2 trucks. Oh man, I was terrified, you know. But backing is something that you learn by doing. It's the only way you're going to learn it. Nobody can tell you how to. They can give you tips, but nobody can tell you how to back. You have to learn how to back up. I can tell you how to make a turn. You know, I can tell you certain things here and there. I cannot tell you how to back up. All I can do is give you tips, and you got to do it yourself. And I've seen a few times, and it's mostly women. Look, women make great drivers. They do. Because women pay a little more attention to detail, and women are not afraid to say, hey, I messed up, show me how to do this right. Where guys, you know, we got the machismo going, you know, we don't want to really do that as much. But women are more likely to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, show me, teach me. But there are some women who every place they went, they would just ask some guy to back their truck in for them. And you never learn like that. And I had a guy do that too. It's not just women. I had a guy in Barstow, California, at the old Rip Griffin's, which is, I guess, is a TA now. I had a 379 Peterbilt, black, chrome lights all over it, fancy truck. You know, it was a West Coast truck. And he was afraid to back in next to it. And he asked me if I would back his truck in. Every truck backs up different, you know. Doesn't matter how good at backing you are, backing somebody else's truck up is always a bit of a challenge. But my point is, you have to learn and you have to practice. That's how you learn, is by practicing. But anyway, just a little short video of what, you know, how things have changed. They're a lot different, man. I mean, some things stay the same. You still got to go from point A to point B. Of course, we had paper logs back then, so we did what we wanted. We drove when we wanted, we slept when we wanted. And you know what? I had less fatigue back then than I do now. Because you cannot legislate when somebody is tired. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But anyway, yeah. I mean, we may go days without touching a logbook back then. We may go days. Unless you're going to California or Tennessee, you know, and maybe 1 or 2 other places that were really hard on stuff like that. And Tennessee were crooks back then. I don't care what anybody says. And I'm not anti-cop, okay? But Tennessee they were crooks back then. If your company didn't pay the state police any money, you were going to get pulled into an inspection station. And you know if your company was paying them off because they would roll you through. And I got rolled through at this one company I worked for. Actually, no, I didn't. He looked at my logbook, which I hadn't touched in 2 days, gave it back to me and said, okay, driver, you're free to go. And I knew right then, yep, we're paying the state of Tennessee. All right, fair enough. But yeah, that's how it was back then. 18 cents a mile. And man, if I made $600 a week, boy, I thought I was high stepping. That was big money at the time, you know. $600 a week, that was nothing to sneeze at. First time I made $2,000 a month, man. Whew. I thought I was right up there with Bill Gates. Yeah, but it was fun though. It was fun. Back when I used to run the West Coast, back and forth between Dallas and LA, or Dallas and Seattle, whatever. It was fun. I had little bars I used to stop at. Not drink and drive. If I was shutting down, you know, I would get me a few beers and have a little fun. Yeah, it was good times. It was scary at times, but it was fun. You had nobody to count on but yourself, especially if you worked for an owner operator or a small company, or you were an owner operator. There was no one out there. I changed many of alternator on the side of the road, belt, starter in a truck stop parking lot. Yeah, I did all kind of stuff. Radiator hoses. I still carry tools with me. You'd be surprised how many of these guys don't carry any tools. But that's for another story. Anyway, this video is already too long. Like I said, if you're not a driver, maybe it's not interesting. If you are, maybe it's still not interesting. I don't know. Have a good day.